Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Zero Gaming here, and of course, before we continue into today's video, if you like my content, consider liking and subscribing to my channel. As well as if you want to further support my channel, you can click the join button to join my membership to enjoy some exclusive benefits and some perks as well. Alright, so let's get into the first unit. We'll be talking about Shelke first. Shelke, she does get a little bit of rework. Her skill 1 and her skill 1 plus both have the same amount of HP dumps. It's a 2 single target HP attack with 50% splash. Both of her skill 2 also has the same amount of HP attack. It's 2 AoE split HP attack. She also gained an upgrade on her skill 2 buff, which is the shield buff. Right now she gained last stand, so pretty unique for her mechanism considering that she doesn't have any heals except using her LD in her kit, so that is quite interesting. Anyway, to gain access to the plus version of her skill, you need to first use the base version, which will then convert the skill to the plus version. There's not much differences right now as compared to before between the base and the plus version, except slightly more bravery hits and potency, so you'll hit the cap limit a little bit better with the plus version. But other than that, it's nice they keep the fact that where she can have the base version dealing the same amount of HP damage with the plus version, because Shelke is used to having a lot of turns, so having a downtime in between turns is not really a very good consideration with the fact that she actually doesn't have a lot of HP dumps in all of her kit. Anyway, her EX with the Crystal Level 90 upgrade does a 6 single target HP attack, and now it does have Brave Refund and Brave Gain between HP attack instead of only just after the first HP attack, which it was before. So like I said, it's gonna be a lot easier for Shelke to cap her HP damage with all this upgrade. She also has an upgrade on the overhead buff, which provides now an additional 20% HP damage up. Her additional ability only lasted for 4 turns, but it's not really a big of an issue because Shelke actually used that additional ability quite often, so it's not very hard to upkeep this particular buff. It's a 1 single target HP attack, and it provides a 45% self attack up and a 30% self brave damage cap up. Alright, so Shelke is a selfish keystone, pretty obvious. She's gonna gain all that HP damage cap up and that bravery damage cap up all for herself. And in my opinion, Shelke is actually very fun to use. She's a unique unit that has warp, which features a warping mechanism which is very similar to Realm, except she's a damage dealer. So this actually assists her in pushing out more damage per turn, since those warping turns are considered as free turns. However, do understand that it's still an action and it will reduce the orb, so that's the really worst part about having units like Shelke in the party. But other than that, Shelke can actually be a very good turn hogging if you understand the way of her utility works or how her free turn and free warping works, because she doesn't just warp in during enemy's turn. In fact, she also warps in when she takes a turn herself. So as long as the turn is not a warp in turn, she'll always warp in whether it's her own turn or the enemy turn. So to fully abuse using Shelke, you want to use her additional ability and her LD on turns when she was being warped in. For example, if she gets a turn, use her skill 2 or her skill 1, and then she'll get another turn which is the warp in turn, and then you want to use your skill, you want to use your additional ability or your LD on that particular turn so that she can gain another follow-up again once she use up the next following action. So Shelke is definitely not the best unit to run with in this current era because her HP dumps only has 2 in each skill. It's not really surprising considering she does get a lot of turns. So if they actually push her damage to a very substantial amount of HP attack, it will be very broken. So I guess 2 HP attack is not too broken, but definitely a little bit lacking. I hope they at least gave us a little bit more, especially during the plus version. But anyway, Shelke can actually perform really well against unit that takes up a lot of turns. Against enemy that takes up a lot of turns. For example, there is the stages where the enemy warps in every time a certain threshold or a certain condition is not met. For example, the Transcendence 6 final boss. The Reckoning Stage Wave 2 final boss actually has a mechanism where they will warp in every time your party takes an action, as long as they don't have at least 5 or 6 debuff on them. So that is actually a very huge disadvantage, especially if you're not running off-turn unit. So Shelke actually helps a lot in that situation, considering that she warps in every time they warp in, so it's like a counter warp, you warp, I warp kind of situation. As for running her with units, I definitely recommend Cessna, easily the best follow-up attack to pair her with Shelke. Although Shelke works a little bit different than most turn hoggers, since she relies on the enemy getting turns for her to get more turns. So I wouldn't say units like Selfie will get a lot of benefit with running Selfie with her, since she can't experience a full launch if she's letting the enemy get turns. Anyway, moving on from Shelke, we'll be getting Booba. Sorry guys, I just couldn't resist it. Anyway, Lulu will be getting the next fire enchanter to the party from Final Fantasy X. So Lulu's skill 1 plus, which will be available once you have at least 5 stacks of her Doormaster buff. And it's really not hard to gain 5 stacks, so I'm just gonna list out the plus version. So Lulu's skill 1 now has 1 additional usage than before, and it now does a 3 split AoE HP attack and it's an ignore defense attack. Her skill 2 plus now has 2 additional usage, it's a 3 split AoE HP attack, and it's a high turn rate skill. Her Crystal Level 90 upgrade with her EX plus now does a 5 split AoE HP attack, and also an improve of her EX buff, which now provides a 30% self brave damage and HP damage up, a 20% self stolen overflow up, and that's about it. Her additional ability now lasted for extended up to 7 turns, now provides a 10% party weakness bravery damage up, a 10% party stolen overflow up, and a 20% party brave damage and brave damage cap up. So her newest kit, which is her LD, is a 7 full AoE HP attack and inflict fire imperil for 4 turns on all enemy. It also grants her 5 stacks of her Doormaster, which is the one I mentioned where it's easily to get because all you need is just use 1 time of her LD. And do note that she gained 3 stacks at quest start, so it's not really that hard to improve the Doormaster even without using her LD. Anyway, the Doormaster with her LD extensions also provides a 25% party HP damage up, a 25% party brave potency when dealing fire damage, and of course a party fire enchant. So although she already provides the party fire enchant buff from her skill 2, at least this LD allows the party to have the fire enchant should the buff from them actually wears off, although it's not very likely since all you need is use her skill 2 again. But this is just a very nice assurance that you can always cut your party fire enchant up as long as Lulu have this buff herself. Anyway, she's a Unity Keystone unit, which means that her high armor plus will increase the party HP damage cap and brave damage cap. So she's a very premium support high armor. I would say that this armor is the best for supporting unit. So Lulu essentially is a enchanter and imperil. I won't say she's essential considering the fact that you can get a lot of enchanter and imperil in the game right now. So Lulu is not exactly very unique catered for one situation, although fire enchant is very rare. If I recall, Ignis is probably the only one that has party-wide fire enchant outside of Lulu. Anyway, so Lulu is, aside from being a enchant, she does have quite a bit of aura for the entire party if you use it together with her additional ability. But other than that, Lulu's own damage is not really that significant, but she does have a lot of, she does provide a very substantial amount for secondary DPS, considering the fact that her skill 1 is an ignore defense attack, and her skill 2 actually increased her turn rate for her to use more of her skill. And her EX is not exactly the slowest recharge gauge EX ever, so 5 split AoE HP attack from her EX is not that bad. The best part is actually her LD with a 7 full AoE HP attack, and her calls actually applies, both of her calls applies the fire enchant as well, so that's a huge plus on the imperil side. But Lulu, other than that, like I said, her kit is rather narrow. You always look at units that has a lot of things going on around their kit, like I mentioned before, where we have the jack of all trades situation. But Lulu is like a unit with very limited coverage of her role, like her LD for example. It only inflict fire imperil, which she already inflict on her other skill, and she grants her the door master, which is not really hard to get up to 5 stacks on her other skill. And outside of those, all her LD does is a huge chunk of damage, and then all her other skill doesn't actually solidify her as a DPS, so her LD is kind of awkward, I guess. Not really what I would expect from a supporting unit. But anyway, that's about what Lulu have. Personally, I think I'm gonna skip this banner on my main account since I already have Shelke and I'm not really interested in Lulu. As for my alternate account, I will try to go for her and see whether she's fun enough to live up to the Final Fantasy X fanboy hype. I'm not exactly a Final Fantasy X fanboy, but I know most Final Fantasy X fan would actually love Lulu as a character. So I guess a lot of people will be pulling for her. I'm not really sure. But anyway, let me know what your plan is for the banner, and let's see whether or not you can have more output or utility from her than what I suggested. Hopefully I can be proven wrong and she can be a lot useful than just standing there looking pretty. Anyway guys, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.